And she provided these beautiful packets for you today. That's why each of you has one, as opposed to when I do it in the copier, James.
Okay, so just to get a feel for you guys' background, do you use Excel very often? Do you? No? A little?
Not really.
Not really? Okay. So SPSS is just a quantitative stat package. There's really two big ones and a bunch of others that you can use. SPSS is menu driven, so that's why it's a good one to get started with, because basically anybody can pick it up and start playing around with it. The other really big package is called SAS, and it is more programming, so you're having to learn all the language for it, and so that's not a good one to just jump into and get started. So I picked SPSS to talk to you guys about, and even if you're doing qualitative research, you often have data that you want to present descriptive statistics for. You want to know things about the range of ages or the means and stuff like that. So SPSS can do that for you, and it's pretty easy to get to use. In all the computer labs around campus, they have SPSS on what's called the virtual desktop, and that's what I'm using through this computer also. SPSS isn't physically installed on this computer. It's installed in some computer, who knows where, and we're just using the internet to access it. And you can do that from any of the computer labs have that, and you won't even really be able to tell that you've done that. So on most computers on campus, if you go here to your start menu and you type in SPSS, it will come up like it'll come up like it's installed on that computer, but when you click on it, this thing will come up that says Citrix, and that's your clue that it's not actually installed on that computer. This one didn't have it as a shortcut like that, and so what we had to do was we had to go through Citrix. If you go to the University of Iowa website and go under Help Desk, you'll see directions on using Citrix, and I think the first page of that handout has notes about that. But for the most part on computers on campus, you can just pretend like it's actually there, and you don't have to go through this. You don't have to do anything special. Okay, so I'm going to, once you open SPSS, it looks like this, so I'm just going to talk about it for a minute. You have two options when you want to use SPSS. You have multiple, but there's two main options for getting your data into SPSS. One is that you can just type it in here. So you have a spreadsheet that you could just start entering your data into. If you had a class or you had a survey that you had given, you could just set it up in here. The other big way is to have an Excel spreadsheet that has your data in it, and you just pull it into SPSS. So either one of those are good ways to get your data in. Okay, so you have SPSS open. It looks like this. You have two tabs down here. One is data view, one is variable view. If I click on the variable view one, I have these different columns, and I can name my different variables. So let's say I have a variable called ID. I would just put that name in there. If I don't do anything else, it's going to guess what all the rest of this stuff is. And if it's right, I can leave it. If it's wrong, I can change it. Maybe my IDs aren't going to be numeric, so I click on that, and I get a box that says, well, what is it going to be? If it's a character ID, so maybe all my IDs start with the letter S or something, I could say it's going to be a string variable. It just means it's, I'm using letters in it instead of just numbers. And then I say okay, and it changes that. A bunch of these don't matter very much, but this one, the type matters, whether it's numeric or string is important, and then the measure matters. If it's a string variable, your only choices are that it's nominal, which just means it's a categorical variable. It's, the value of it doesn't have any order. Or if it's ordinal, that just means, there's some meaning to the order of them, low and high, there's some meaning So I'm just going to say it's nominal. It's just an ID that I assign to people. Maybe my next one is name. So my next variable, I just type that in. It's going to guess what all this stuff is. Once again, it's wrong. It's going to be a string here. So I'll change that. And yeah, names are typically nominal. And maybe I have a score. So yeah, that's numeric. It doesn't know what type of variable it is, so I click on this. Since it was a numeric variable, I have another option, which is scale. And that just means that the values of it have meaning. The values of that variable have meaning. So if somebody got a 20, I know that that's twice as much as if they got a 10. So a lot of your numeric variables are going to be scale variables. So make sure you've got these set at what you want them to be. It's important when you go to analyze your data, because SPSS won't let you do things unless it's the proper level of measurement. Okay, so you set up some variables, you go to data view, you now see those as column headings over here. Okay, so if you're just entering your data from pieces of paper that you have, you could say, well, maybe the ID of the first person in my study is S01, and her name is Katie, and I gave her this instrument that measured, achievement in math or something, and she got an 87. Okay, and you can just type this stuff in, and you probably have a whole lot of more variables than what I specified here, but you can just enter your data like this. Okay, the way data sets are set up is your columns are your different variables. Okay, so however many variables you had, they would each take up a column here, and then your rows are different observations. So if you're studying students, each row of data would be a different student. If you were studying mice, each row would be a different mouse, that kind of thing. Once you have a data set, okay, you can save it. So I can just click on save here, and hopefully, and I'll get a box popping up here, and I can, navigate to where I want to be. I'll put this in my H drive. So what happens here is, because this is actually on Citrix and it's not installed locally on this computer, what had to happen when I opened SPSS was it had to map all the local drives onto what the drives within Citrix. So these names look different than what you would see if you were just on, say Excel or something that was installed on the computer. So sometimes it's a little harder to find what you want. I know that this is my H drive because it says SBAR in there. So I'll click on that one. At least I thought that was mine. H drive. Maybe it's not. Oops.
There you go.
There, that's my H drive. Okay, better. And I have created a folder for this class, so I'll go in here and I can save it, and it gets, if I don't put anything in here, it's going to save as untitled. It saves it as a type of file called .sav, so that just tells the computer that it's an SPSS data file. And if I wanted to change it as something else, if I wanted to save it as something else, I could click that little arrow there, and I could pick something else, like maybe I want to save it as just a tab delimited file right there, or a comma delimited file, or just a flat file. I could do any of those. But most of the time, it's just fine for us to save it as a SPSS data file, so I say save. Okay. And I know that it got saved because two things. One, I get this output window that pops open and it gives me a note that it got saved and what name I saved it and where I saved it. And also, I now have a name up here, so I know that this data is saved here. Okay, so that's one way to get data into SPSS, is just type it in yourself. The other really common way to do it is if you've already put it into an Excel file, you can just pull that Excel file into SPSS. So a lot of people find it a lot easier to type their data into Excel, or if you're doing like an online survey, you may have used something like Qualtrics, which will just give you an Excel file, and then you can pull that Excel file into SPSS. That works really well. This is a made-up data set, but I made it up so that it has some of the relationships among the variables that you actually see in real data, so we can do a little bit of analysis. But this is just a class data. This is data from a class. It happens to be based on a stats class. And I have a number of variables here. I have people's first names and last names. I have this surname variable, which just tells me that the first letter of their last name, what letter is it in the alphabet? So these people's last names begin with A, so they get a 1. These begin with a B, so they get a 2, C, on all the way up down to the people with names beginning with W. That's 20. That's the 23rd letter in the alphabet. This is their attendance. This is whether or not they completed an ungraded assignment. This is their score on a graded assignment. This is the score on a test. And this is whether or not they're in a study group. Okay? So it's made up, but it's based on some real relationships, so I can show you some stuff. I could pull, this is an Excel spreadsheet, okay? But I can pull this data into SPSS pretty easily. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that. If I go here and I say File, and I say Open, okay, I have the option to open a data set. So I'm going to say Data here. I get a box, and I would navigate to where I want to be, but I want to be in this folder that I'm already in, so I'm good here. And I want to open that Excel spreadsheet. The problem is I don't see that Excel spreadsheet here. The only thing I see is that data set I just saved. Okay? So one of the little tricks of SPSS is you have to remember that it's only showing you files of the type that are in this box. Okay? So if I go over here and I say, oh, I actually want to see what Excel files are in this, and I know those are the extensions that Excel files have, okay? Then it shows me in this same folder what Excel data sets I have. And here's the data that I want to open, so I click on that. I say open. It takes a minute. Oops, okay. I get this box, okay? Typically, I don't have to do anything here, okay? The first thing it says is read variable names from the first row of data. Okay, if I go over here, when I entered all this data into Excel, or when I downloaded it from an online survey program like Qualtrics, I put the names of my variables in that first row, and then I started my actual data in the second row. And so that makes it really easy for SPSS because it's just going to read those variables in that first row and then start the data after that. So I don't have to change anything here. I just say OK. And then it pulls all that data into SPSS, and now I have an SPSS data set. If you look up here, you see it's not saved. It just says untitled. Okay? So if I want to keep it as an SPSS data set, I'm going to want to say save here. Okay? And I get that same box. Okay? I'm going to save it as class data, but I'm going to save it as now an SPSS data set, so I don't have to pull it in from Excel anymore. So I just say save there. Okay, and now it says that name up here, and I have this data set. Okay, one thing you want to check when you do that is remember you have the two tabs here. So in data view, you're looking at the actual data. In variable view, you're looking at the names of the variables and the characteristics of those. What SPSS did is when it pulled it in from Excel, it decided what it thought the type was, and it decided what level of measurement that you had. And so you may need to change some of those. My IDs were all numeric, so it said that they were scale, meaning that differences between the values are important. Not really. My IDs are just, there so that each person is uniquely identified. So I'm going to change that to nominal. My surname, which was that number that told me what letter, where in the alphabet their last name was, that got read in here as nominal. Okay, I want to do things with it that treat it like a number that's on a scale. So I want to make sure I go in here and change this to scale. I'm not going to do that right now, so I can show you why that's important, but we'll come back and do that later. So a good thing to do is just go and check that these are what you want them to be, and then if you change anything, you can just click Save again. All right. Questions? That's getting your data into into SPSS, but that's not the fun stuff. The fun stuff is actually finding out, what your data has to tell you. So any questions before we go into more interesting stuff? No? Okay. So once you have your data in here, you can do analysis. So under Analyze here, you'll see a whole lot of different things that you might want to do. You typically want to start with some descriptive statistics. So I come down here to descriptive statistics, and I get a whole list of different things that it would do for me. Okay, so maybe I want to let me show you one more thing, because I think this. Oh yeah. Okay. One more. Well, I'll show you that in a minute. Okay. So under here, maybe I want to do some descriptive statistics. Let's do some frequencies. Okay. So I click on that and I get a box, and the way SPSS works is it'll give you a list over here on the left of all the variables that are appropriate for what you've asked for, the type of analysis you've asked for. And that's where that level of measurement comes into it. And then on the right, it will have an empty box, okay? And what you do is anything you want to analyze, you're going to put in this box over here. So maybe I want a frequency distribution of their study group. Were they in a study group or were they not in a study group? I can click on that and I can move it over. So that arrow, so let me undo that. Okay, so right now the arrow is facing this way. Okay, so if I click on it, whatever I have highlighted there is going to move over here. Okay, once I have something over here, the arrow switches directions so I could move it back if I wanted. But the nice thing is you can also just drag it over if you want to, if you're more comfortable with that. You have options over here that you can play around with for getting graphs and stuff, but for right now, let's just do some frequencies. Okay. So when I do an analysis, it's going to show up in this output window. Okay. So I had 35 observations, okay, it says, and it gives me 5 observations that had nothing there, so that's just blank. I had 10 observations that were no, but it's lowercase, 7 observations that were no, but the N was an uppercase N, 13 observations where it was yes, for a total of 35 observations. So what typically happens is that you do some frequency distributions and you realize you need some data cleaning. You've got some issues here. I don't want them to treat lowercase no and no with a capital N to be different things. They're all N. They're all no. Okay? So I may want to go in here and change my data. So I'm going to go over here and do a little cleaning. One thing I noticed is that another thing I knew going into it was that I was supposed to have 30 observations. Output window. Okay. I'm partly miffed about why this is a 35 because I knew that I knew that my class had 30 people in it. So why do I have 35? I go over to my data and I see at the bottom, when it imported it from Excel, it just imported 5 more rows of empty data. There's no values there. So one thing I'd like to do to clean the data is get rid of those. So if I click down, if I click on it, I can highlight that row, and if I just click each one, I can highlight them. If I want to click multiple rows, I'm going to hold down the control key and then click, and I can select multiple ones, and then I can go up here and I can say cut, and I just get rid of those. Okay, so now it knows that I have 30 observations. It's not going to give me those 5 missing values, so that's good. I also wanted to I wanted to change these no's. If you wanted to, you could go in here and, type it well, actually, I'll just do all lowercase. I could find one that's a capital N, and I could just type it, okay? That works when I have 30 observations. If I have a lot more than that, I can have SPSS do it for me too. So I can go here under data, so I can go here under transform, okay, and I can say recode into same variables, okay, and that just gives me an option to recode something. So this was my study group variable. I didn't like that some people had no with a capital N and some had no with a lowercase. So I'm going to change the ones that were no with a capital to just being no with a lowercase. So that I put the old value, the original value here under old, and I put the new value over here under new, and I have to click add. If I don't click add, it doesn't show up in this box, and then it doesn't actually happen until it shows up in this box. Okay? So now all it's going to do is it's going to change in my data set all the instances of no with a capital N into no with a lowercase n. Okay? And so I say continue and OK, and I get a note that it did this, and I go over and I look at my data, and I go down here, and now I don't have any that have no with an uppercase. I just changed that. Okay? And so now, if I want to redo, I did some data cleaning. I want to redo those frequency distributions I've done before. I have this nice little icon right here. If I hover over that, it says recall recently used dialogues, which can be handy. So if I click on that, I get a list of things that I've done. Okay? The first thing I did was frequency distributions. If I click on that, it just pulls up that exact same analysis. So I don't have to move the variables or anything. I can just pull that up and say, oh yeah, I want to do that again. Okay? Now I see, oh good, I have 30 observations. Okay? 17 of them were no's. They weren't in a study group. 13 were yeses. They were in a study group. And maybe in my report, I'm going to report the percentages. So 56.7% were not in a study group. 43.3% were in a study group. Okay. I have another variable here that was called assignment 1. And I had just put an X in for anybody that submitted that assignment because it wasn't graded. I just wanted to keep track of whether people did the assignment. Okay. So I know I have 25 that did the assignment. That's 83% of the class. I have 5 people who didn't. That's just blank. Okay. Maybe I want to change that because I want to put this table into my report. Maybe I want to change that so that it's not just blank and X. Okay. I could do a little more data cleaning. I could come over here. Another thing you can do under transform is you can create a new variable. So maybe I want to recode into a different variable. Okay. So I'm going to take that assignment 1 that was just blanks and X's. Oops, I need to click it twice. I'm going to move it over here. I'm going to create a new variable, which I'll just call A1 for assignment 1, and I'll write it out. If I want a label for it, I'll write out assignment 1. And then I click change, which brings it into this box, which tells me is what I need. I need it to be set up in that box. I do the same thing. Oh, so you'll notice right now, I couldn't click OK if I wanted to. Okay. So one thing SPSS does to help you is it sets up, it's cluing you in that you're not done here. by not letting you click on OK. It's not ready for you to click on OK because although you've said you want a new variable called A1, you haven't told it how to create that variable. Okay, so you go to old and new values, and I want everything that's blank, okay, to be, well, actually I'll do it different. I want everything that's an X to be changed to the value of yes. Oops, it's not going to, it doesn't like that. Output, I have to tell it that output variables are strings. Okay. I want everything there to be yes. So if they did the assignment, I had given them an X. My new variable, I want that to be a yes, they did it. Or maybe I want it to say completed. Okay? And I say add, and it goes in here. All the X's become incomplete, or become completed. And then everybody else, all those people that left it blank, I'm going to give them a value of not completed. I think I need to, it is only going to go out to 8 characters, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I'm going to say I want the width of this to be bigger than 8, so I'll make it 15. Make sense? Okay, I have to say add. I could now say continue, but I haven't actually put this transformation in here until I click add. Okay, so everybody that was an X gets the new variable is going to say completed. Everybody else is not completed. I say continue, then I say okay. Okay, I get a note here that it happened, tells me what it did. Okay, if I go over to my data set, I now have a new column, and it's just telling me, what this new variable, all the X's here say completed, the blanks say not completed. Okay? And now if I wanted to do a frequency distribution for that, I can go back here to frequencies, and now I'm going to take out that original variable, and I'm going to put in my new variable. So the nice thing here, here's the new table. Completed, 25 people, 83%. Not completed, 5 people, 16.7%. The cool thing is I can click on this, and I can right-click it and say copy. And then if I have a Word document open, tell me words on here somewhere. No? Okay. If I had a Word document in it here, I could just say copy and paste, and I could paste that into my document, and I would have a table, which I could edit if I wanted to. So that makes SPSS really helpful when you're building up a report. Even if you're not doing a quantitative research, you probably want some descriptive statistics in there, and this can get that for you. Okay. Let's see. Other types of so you generally want to start out by doing descriptive statistics on everything because you need to see if you need to clean your data. Once you have your data clean, you probably have some other analyses you want to do. What I find amazing about teaching, and I don't know if you guys have come across this or talked about it in your classes, but there is a phenomenon where people with last names that are closer to the beginning of the alphabet get better grades. Have you ever heard that before? It is actually true.
That's real true?
It is actually really, real true. And the reason I found out is I was teaching a class once. And I was like, why do these students have, I noticed it in my class. And I was like, and I calculated the correlation because I'm a statistician and it was significant. And I was like, what the heck? And so I went and did a list search. And there's a literature out there about it. It's a true thing. And so this is, like I said, I changed the names, I made up the data. But I kept I kept the data true to what the relationship is, so I'll show you this relationship here with this data set. So I created this surname variable. So everybody with a last name that begins with A is a 1. Okay, so the farther you are towards the end of the alphabet, the bigger your value is for surname. And I can calculate a correlation there. So I go to analyze, I go down here to correlate, and I go to bivariate. And I want to, everybody at least loosely knows what a correlation is, right? Okay, they range from -1 to +1. If it's positive, it's saying that high values on one variable go along with high values on the other variable. If it's a negative correlation, it's telling you that high values on one variable tend to go with low values on the other variable. Okay, if we plot it, it's which way the slope of that line is, and I'll show you that. Okay, so I want to do a correlation between this surname variable. Oh, I want to show you something. It let me do it. Okay, never mind. So I want to do a correlation between surname and what their test score was. Okay, so I moved those variables into the box over here, and I just want a regular correlation, so I keep the defaults here, and it's going to tell me whether or not it's statistically significant. And there's some options here. Okay, I could get the means and the standard deviations. I'll click that option. I'll say continue. Okay, and I'm going to say okay. And it's going to come up here, and the correlation between, so this is a table, or a matrix basically, and so it's telling you that surname correlates with surname, +1, it's the same variable, so it should have a perfect positive correlation. But what we're interested in is this next one. How does surname, which is that 1, 2, 3 up to 26, if I had anybody with a Z in my class, with the test score. I get a correlation here that's -372. Okay? That's telling me that people with values on the surname that are low, so their last names are at the early part of the alphabet, they have low values for surname, tend to have higher scores on the test. Okay? So it's a negative correlation because names at the beginning of the alphabet tend to have the higher scores. And this next thing is the significance. How many of you have had some stats somewhere along the way? So you know statistical significance. Okay, typically we use what's called a significance level of 0.05. So if this value is something less than 0.05, we say what we're seeing isn't just due to chance, it's actually something that's real in the data. Okay, and this one's below 0.05. So I can say, yeah, I'm actually seeing in this particular class that there is a relationship between where your name falls in the alphabet and how you do on the test. Okay? Real relationship. I thought that it was a good one to bring to future teachers because I don't know if the answer to this is that, half the time in school the teachers should just reverse the alphabetical order and give those poor students at the end of the alphabet some, chance to get this. Nobody knows what the cause of this is, but it shows up. It shows up apparently in all kinds of classes at all kinds of ages. So I see it in college classes. I've read research that shows it in elementary and high school classes. So apparently it's real. Okay, so that's a correlation coefficient. Another type of analysis you might want to do is to compare groups. So one of these things you can do is says compare means. If you just have two groups, you may want to do a t-test. Okay, so independent samples t-test is a common analysis that we do. Maybe I want to, actually, I'll do this. I know what I'll do. Some of the research I read about this phenomenon said that the way they found it was it's not really the case that it's a relationship across the entire alphabet. It's more a fact that if your name is at the very beginning, you have an advantage, which I guess goes along with the idea that if teachers consistently through your life are looking at the class list alphabetically, they pay attention to the first ones they see, or they end up knowing those kids' names more, and there's more accountability. Or I don't know if this still happens in schools, but I know when I was in school, we got seated alphabetical, and I was in the front of the class all the time. So I don't know. So one way that some people have done this analysis is to say, well, I'm not going to give the surnames 1 through 26 based on the first letter. I'm just going to say everybody with a first name that's like A, B, or a last name that begins with an A, B, or C is in one group, and everybody else is in another group. So you could create a new variable there where you said, okay, let me see, to transform. So I could create a new variable. Maybe and so if you want to clear out everything that got done earlier, you do reset here, and it just sets this up to be empty. Maybe I want to recode this surname variable to a new one that is, I'll call group surname. And I'm just going to create 2 groups here. Oops, I put a space in it, I think is my problem. Okay, and I'm going to say anybody whose last name begins with A, B, or C, okay, is going to be in my group 1. And then everybody else is going to be in my group 2. So basically, I think I'm going to say people whose last names begin with A, B, or C have an advantage because the teacher looks at the class list alphabetically and notices those kids more. That's my hypothesis. Okay? So now I have another new variable that I can look at over here, and I can check to see if I got it. Everybody at the beginning has a 1, and then everybody else has a 2. So this is just another way to do the exact same analysis, but now I'm doing it as a t-test. Okay? So I'm going to say compare means, and then I'm going to say independent samples t-test. And I still want to compare their test scores. So I'm going to put my test variable as their test score. And now I'm going to group them based on this variable I created called group surname. Okay, the way the t-test works in SPSS is you have to tell it what your 2 groups are. So notice I can't click OK yet. I have to click on this define groups, and my group 1 is just going to